The Zodiac Killer is the pseudonym of an unidentified serial killer who operated in Northern California in the late 1960s. The case has been described as the most famous unsolved murder case in American history, becoming a fixture of popular culture and inspiring amateur detectives to attempt to resolve it. The Zodiac murdered 5 known victims in the San Francisco Bay Area between December 1968 and October 1969. Operating in rural, urban, and suburban settings. He targeted young couples and a lone male cab driver, and his known attacks took place in Benicia, Vallejo, unincorporated Napa County, and the city of San Francisco proper. 2 of his attempted victims survived. The Zodiac himself claimed to have murdered 37 victims, and he has been linked to several other cold cases, some in Southern California or outside the state. The Zodiac originated the name himself in a series of taunting letters and cards that he mailed to regional newspapers, threatening killing sprees and bombings if they were not printed. Some of the letters included cryptograms, or ciphers, in which the killer claimed that he was collecting his victims as slaves for the afterlife. Of the 4 ciphers he produced, 2 remain unsolved, and 1 was cracked only in 2020. While many theories regarding the identity of the killer have been suggested, the only suspect authorities ever publicly named was Arthur Lee Allen, a former elementary school teacher and convicted sex offender who died in 1992. Although the Zodiac ceased written communications around 1974, the unusual nature of the case led to international interest that has sustained throughout the years. The San Francisco Police Department marked the case inactive in April 2004, but reopened it at some point prior to March 2007. The case also remains open in the city of Vallejo, as well as in Napa County and Solano County. The California Department of Justice has maintained an open case file on the Zodiac murders since 1969. Name: the English word zodiac derives from zodiacus, the Latinized form of the ancient Greek zodiacs kyklos, meaning cycle or circle of little animals. Zodian is the diminutive of zon. The name reflects the prominence of animals among the 12 signs. Usage: the zodiac was in use by the Roman era, based on concepts inherited by Hellenistic astronomy from Babylonian astronomy of the Chaldean period, which, in turn, derived from an earlier system of lists of stars along the ecliptic. The construction of the zodiac is described in Ptolemy's comprehensive 2nd century AD work, the Almagest. Although the zodiac remains the basis of the ecliptic coordinate system in use in astronomy besides the equatorial one, the term and the names of the 12 signs are today mostly associated with horoscopic astrology. The term zodiac may also refer to the region of the celestial sphere encompassing the paths of the planets corresponding to the band of about 8 arc degrees above and below the ecliptic. The zodiac of a given planet is the band that contains the path of that particular body, e.g., the zodiac of the Moon is the band of 5 degrees above and below the ecliptic. By extension, the zodiac of the comets may refer to the band encompassing most short-period comets. History. Early history. As early as the 14th century BC, a complete list of the 36 Egyptian decans was placed among the hieroglyphs adorning the tomb of Seti I. They figured again in the temple of Ramesses II, and characterize every Egyptian astrological monument. Both the famous zodiacs of Dendera display their symbols, unmistakably identified by Carl Richard Lepsius. The division of the ecliptic into the zodiacal signs originates in Babylonian astronomy during the first half of the first millennium BC. The zodiac draws on stars in earlier Babylonian star catalogues, such as the Mul.Apin catalog, which was compiled around 1000 BC. Some constellations can be traced even further back, to Bronze Age sources, including Gemini the Twins, from ma.tab.ba.gal the Great Twins, and Cancer the Crab, from al.lul the Crayfish, among others. Around the end of the 5th century BC, Babylonian astronomers divided the ecliptic into 12 equal signs, by analogy to 12 schematic months of 30 days each. Each sign contained 30 degrees of celestial longitude, thus creating the first known celestial coordinate system. According to calculations by modern astrophysics, the zodiac was introduced between 409 and 398 BC, during Persian rule, and probably within a very few years of 401 BC. Unlike modern astrologers, who place the beginning of the sign of Aries at the position of the sun at the vernal equinox in the northern hemisphere, Babylonian astronomers fixed the zodiac in relation to stars, placing the beginning of Cancer at the rear twin star and the beginning of Aquarius at the rear star of the goat fish. Due to the precession of the equinoxes, the time of year the sun is in a given constellation has changed since Babylonian times. The point of March equinox has moved from Aries into Pisces. Because the division was made into equal arcs, 30 degrees each, they constituted an ideal system of reference for making predictions about a planet's longitude. However, Babylonian techniques of observational measurements were in a rudimentary stage of evolution. They measured the position of a planet in reference to a set of normal stars close to the ecliptic as observational reference points to help positioning a planet within this ecliptic coordinate system. In Babylonian astronomical diaries, a planet position was generally given with respect to a zodiacal sign alone, less often in specific degrees within a sign. When the degrees of longitude were given, they were expressed with reference to the 30 degrees of the zodiacal sign, i.e., not with a reference to the continuous 360 degrees ecliptic. In astronomical ephemerides, the positions of significant astronomical phenomena were computed in sexagesimal fractions of a degree. For daily ephemerides, the daily positions of a planet were not as important as the astrologically significant dates when the planet crossed from one zodiacal sign to the next. Hebrew astronomy and astrology. Knowledge of the Babylonian zodiac is said to be reflected in the Hebrew Bible. E. W. Bullinger interpreted the creatures appearing in the Book of Ezekiel as the middle signs of the 4 quarters of the zodiac, with the lion as Leo, the bull as Taurus, the man representing Aquarius and the eagle representing Scorpio. Some authors have linked the 12 tribes of Israel with the same signs or the lunar Hebrew calendar having 12 lunar months in a lunar year. Martin and others have argued that the arrangement of the tribes around the tabernacle corresponded to the order of the zodiac, with Judah, Reuben, Ephraim, and Dan representing the middle signs of Leo, Aquarius, Taurus, and Scorpio, respectively. Such connections were taken up by Thomas Mann, who in his novel Joseph and His Brothers attributes characteristics of a sign of the zodiac to each tribe in his rendition of the Blessing of Jacob. Hellenistic and Roman era. The Babylonian star catalogues entered Greek astronomy in the 4th century BC, via Eudocus of Cnidus. Babylonia or Chaldea in the Hellenistic world came to be so identified with astrology that Chaldean wisdom became among Greeks and Romans the synonym of divination through the planets and stars. Hellenistic astrology derived in part from Babylonian and Egyptian astrology. Horoscopic astrology first appeared in Ptolemaic Egypt. The Dendera zodiac, a relief dating to ca. 50 BC, is the first known depiction of the classical zodiac of 12 signs. The earliest extant Greek text using the Babylonian division of the zodiac into 12 signs of 30 equal degrees each is the Anaphoricus of Hypsicles of Alexandria. Particularly important in the development of Western horoscopic astrology was the astrologer and astronomer Ptolemy, whose work Tetrabiblos laid the basis of the Western astrological tradition. Under the Greeks, and Ptolemy in particular, the planets, houses, and signs of the zodiac were rationalized and their function set down in a way that has changed little to the present day. Ptolemy lived in the 2nd century AD, 3 centuries after the discovery of the precession of the equinoxes by Hipparchus around 130 BC. Hipparchus's lost work on precession never circulated very widely until it was brought to prominence by Ptolemy, and there are few explanations of precession outside the work of Ptolemy until late antiquity, by which time Ptolemy's influence was widely established. Ptolemy clearly explained the theoretical basis of the Western zodiac as being a tropical coordinate system, by which the zodiac is aligned to the equinoxes and solstices, rather than the visible constellations that bear the same names as the zodiac signs. Hindu zodiac. According to mathematician-historian Montekla, the Hindu zodiac was adopted from the Greek zodiac through communications between ancient India and the Greek Empire of Bactria. The Hindu zodiac uses the sidereal coordinate system, which makes reference to the fixed stars. The tropical zodiac is divided by the intersections of the ecliptic and equator, which shifts in relation to the backdrop of fixed stars at a rate of 1 degree every 72 years, creating the phenomenon known as precession of the equinoxes. The Hindu zodiac, being sidereal, does not maintain this seasonal alignment, but there are still similarities between the two systems. The Hindu zodiac signs and corresponding Greek signs sound very different, being in Sanskrit and Greek respectively, but their symbols are nearly identical. For example, Danu means bow and corresponds to Sagittarius, the archer, and Kumha means water pitcher and corresponds to Aquarius, the water carrier. Middle Ages. During the Abbasid era, Greek reference books were systematically translated into Arabic, and Islamic astronomers then did their own observations, correcting Ptolemy's Almagest. One such book was Al-Sufi's Book of Fixed Stars, which has pictorial depictions of 48 constellations. The book was divided into 3 sections: constellations of the zodiac, constellations north of the zodiac, and southern constellations. When Al-Sufi's book, and other works, were translated in the 11th century, there were mistakes made in the translations. As a result, some stars ended up with the names of the constellation they belonged to. The High Middle Ages saw a revival of interest in Greco-Roman magic, first in Kabbalism and later continued in Renaissance magic. This included magical uses of the zodiac, as found, e.g., in the Sepharasial Hamalach. The zodiac is found in medieval stained glass as at Angers Cathedral, where the master glassmaker, André Robin, made the ornate rosettes for the north and south transepts after the fire there in 1451. Mughal King Jahangir issued an attractive series of coins in gold and silver depicting the 12 signs of the zodiac. Medieval Islamic era. Astrology emerged in the 8th century CE as a distinct discipline in Islam, 64 with a mix of Indian, Hellenistic Iranian, and other traditions blended with Greek and Islamic astronomical knowledge, for example Ptolemy's work and Al-Sufi's Book of Fixed Stars. A knowledge of the influence that the stars have on events on the earth was important in Islamic civilization. As a rule, it was believed that the signs of the zodiac and the planets control the destiny not only of people but also of nations, and that the zodiac has the ability to determine a person's physical characteristics as well as intelligence and personal traits. The practice of astrology at this time could be divided into 4 broader categories: genethliology, katarchic astrology, interrogational astrology, and general astrology. 65 However, the most common type of astrology was genethliology, which examined all aspects of a person's life in relation to the planetary positions at their birth, more commonly known as our horoscope. 65 Astrology services were offered widely across the empire, mainly in bazaars, where people could pay for a reading. Astrology was valued in the royal courts. For example, the Abbasid Caliph Al-Mansur used astrology to determine the best date for founding the new capital of Baghdad. 66 However, whilst horoscopes were generally widely accepted by society, many scholars condemned the use of astrology and divination, linking it to occult influences. Many theologians and scholars thought that it went against the tenets of Islam, as only God should be able to determine events rather than astrologers looking at the positions of the planets. In order to calculate someone's horoscope, an astrologer would use three tools: an astrolabe, ephemeris, and a tact. First, the astrologer would use an astrolabe to find the position of the sun, align the rule with the person's time of birth, and then align the reading to establish the altitude of the sun on that date. Next, the astrologer would use an ephemeris, a table denoting the mean position of the planets and stars within the sky at any given time. Finally, the astrologer would add the altitude of the sun taken from the astrolabe, with the mean position of the planets on the person's birthday, and add them together on the tact. The dust board was merely a tablet covered in sand, on which the calculations could be made and erased easily. Once this had been calculated, the astrologer was then able to interpret the horoscope. Most of these interpretations were based on the zodiac in literature. For example, there were several manuals on how to interpret each zodiac sign, the treatise relating to each individual sign and what the characteristics of these zodiacs were. Early modern. An example of the use of signs as astronomical coordinates may be found in the Nautical Almanac and Astronomical Ephemeris for the year 1767. The longitude of the sun columns show the sign, degrees from 0 to 29, minutes, and seconds. The zodiac symbols are early modern simplifications of conventional pictorial representations of the signs, attested since Hellenistic times. 12 signs. What follows is a list of the signs of the modern zodiac, where 0 degrees Aries is understood as the vernal equinox, with their Latin, Greek, Sanskrit, and Babylonian names. But note that the Sanskrit and the name equivalents denote the constellations only, not the tropical zodiac signs. The English translation isn't usually used by English speakers. The Latin names are standard English usage. The following table compares the Gregorian dates on which the sun enters a sign in the Ptolemaic tropical zodiac, and a sign in the sidereal system proposed by Cyril Fagan. The beginning of Aries is defined as the moment of vernal equinox, and all other dates shift accordingly. The precise Gregorian times and dates vary slightly from year to year as the Gregorian calendar shifts relative to the tropical year. These variations remain within less than 2 days difference in the recent past and the near future, vernal equinox in UT always falling either on 20 or March 21 in the period of 1797 to 2043, falling on March 19 in 1796 the last time and in 2044 the next. The vernal equinox has fallen on March 20 UT since 2008, and will continue to do so until 2043. As each sign takes up exactly 30 degrees of the zodiac, the average duration of the solar stay in each sign is 1/12 of a sidereal year, or 30.43 standard days. Due to Earth's slight orbital eccentricity, the duration of each sign varies appreciably. Between about 29.4 days for Capricorn and about 31.4 days for Cancer. In addition, because the Earth's axis is at an angle, some signs take longer to rise than others, and the farther away from the equator the observer is situated, the greater the difference. Thus, signs are spoken of as long or short ascension. Constellations. In tropical astrology, the zodiacal signs are distinct from the constellations associated with them, not only because of their drifting apart due to the precession of equinoxes but because the physical constellations take up varying widths of the ecliptic, so the sun is not in each constellation for the same amount of time, 25. Thus, Virgo takes up 5 times as much ecliptic longitude as Scorpius. The zodiacal signs are an abstraction from the physical constellations, and each represent exactly 1/1/2th of the full circle, but the time spent by the sun in each sign varies slightly due to the eccentricity of the Earth's orbit. Sidereal astrology remedies this by assigning the zodiac sign approximately to the corresponding constellation. This alignment needs recalibrating every so often to keep the alignment in place. The ecliptic intersects with 13 constellations of Ptolemy's Almagest, as well as of the more precisely delineated IAU-designated constellations. In addition to the 12 constellations after which the 12 zodiac signs are named, the ecliptic intersects Ophiuchus, the bottom part of which interjects between Scorpio and Sagittarius. Occasionally this difference between the astronomical constellations and the astrological signs is mistakenly reported in the popular press as a change to the list of traditional signs by some astronomical body like the IAU, NASA, or the Royal Astronomical Society. This happened in a 1995 report of the BBC 9 O'Clock News and various reports in 2011 and 2016. Some parazodiacal constellations are touched by the paths of the planets, leading to counts of up to 25 constellations of the zodiac. The ancient Babylonian Mole.apin catalog lists Orion, Perseus, Auriga, and Andromeda. Modern astronomers have noted that planets pass through Crater, Sextans, Cetus, Pegasus, Corvus, Hydra, and Scutum, with Venus very rarely passing through Aquila, Canis Minor, Auriga, and Serpens. Some other constellations are mythologically associated with the zodiacal ones. Piscis Austrinus, the southern fish, is attached to Aquarius. In classical maps, it swallows the stream poured out of Aquarius' pitcher, but perhaps it formerly just swam in it. Aquila, the eagle, was possibly associated with the zodiac by virtue of its main star, Altair. Hydra in the early Bronze Age marked the celestial equator and was associated with Leo, which is shown standing on the serpent on the Dendera zodiac. Corvus is the crow or raven mysteriously perched on the tail of Hydra. Precession of the equinoxes. The zodiac system was developed in Babylonia, some 2,500 years ago, during the Age of Aries. At the time, it is assumed, the precession of the equinoxes was unknown. Contemporary use of the coordinate system is presented with the choice of interpreting the system either as sidereal, with the signs fixed to the stellar background, or as tropical, with the signs fixed to the point at the March equinox. Western astrology takes the tropical approach, whereas Hindu astrology takes the sidereal one. This results in the originally unified zodiacal coordinate system drifting apart gradually, with a clockwise precession of 1.4 degrees per century. For the tropical zodiac used in Western astronomy and astrology, this means that the tropical sign of Aries currently lies somewhere within the constellation Pisces. The sidereal coordinate system takes into account the ionum sa, ion meaning transit or movement, and amsa meaning small part, i.e. movement of equinoxes in small parts. It is unclear when Indians became aware of the precession of the equinoxes, but Pskaratu's 12th century treatise Siddhanta Shiromani gives equations for measurement of precession of equinoxes, and says his equations are based on some lost equations of Surya Siddhanta plus the equation of Manjala. The discovery of precession is attributed to Hipparchus around 130 BC. Ptolemy quotes from Hipparchus' now lost work entitled On the Displacement of the Solstitial and Equinoctial Points in the 7th book of his 2nd century astronomical text, Almagest, where he describes the phenomenon of precession and estimates its value. Ptolemy clarified that the convention of Greek mathematical astronomy was to commence the zodiac from the point of the vernal equinox and to always refer to this point as the first degree of Aries. This is known as the tropical zodiac because its starting point revolves through the circle of background constellations over time. The principle of the vernal point acting as the first degree of the zodiac for Greek astronomers is described in the 1st century BC astronomical text of Geminus of Rhodes. Geminus explains that Greek astronomers of his era associate the first degrees of the zodiac signs with the 2 solstices and the 2 equinoxes, in contrast to the older Chaldean system, which placed these points within the zodiac signs. This illustrates that Ptolemy merely clarified the convention of Greek astronomers and did not originate the principle of the tropical zodiac, as is sometimes assumed. Ptolemy demonstrates that the principle of the tropical zodiac was well known to his predecessors within his astrological text, the Tetrabiblos, where he explains why it would be an error to associate the regularly spaced signs of the seasonally aligned zodiac with the irregular boundaries of the visible constellations. The beginnings of the signs, and likewise those of the terms, are to be taken from the equinoctial and tropical points. This rule is not only clearly stated by writers on the subject, but is especially evident by the demonstration constantly afforded, that their natures, influences, and familiarities have no other origin than from the tropics and equinoxes, as has been already plainly shown. And, if other beginnings were allowed, it would either be necessary to exclude the natures of the signs from the theory of prognostication, or impossible to avoid error in then retaining and making use of them, as the regularity of their spaces and distances, upon which their influence depends, would then be invaded and broken in upon. In modern astronomy, astronomically, the zodiac defines a belt of space extending 8 degrees or 9 degrees in celestial latitude to the north and south of the ecliptic, within which the orbits of the Moon and the principal planets remain. It is a feature of the ecliptic coordinate system, a celestial coordinate system centered upon the ecliptic, by which celestial longitude is measured in degrees east of the vernal equinox. The zodiac is narrow in angular terms because most of the Sun's planets have orbits that have only a slight inclination to the orbital plane of the Earth. Stars within the zodiac are subject to occultations by the Moon and other solar system bodies. These events can be useful, for example, to estimate the cross-sectional dimensions of a minor planet, or check a star for a close companion. The Sun's placement upon the vernal equinox, which occurs annually around March 21, defines the starting point for measurement, the first degree of which is historically known as the first point of Aries. The first 30 degrees along the ecliptic is nominally designated as the zodiac sign Aries, which no longer falls within the proximity of the constellation Aries, since the effect of precession is to move the vernal point through the backdrop of visible constellations. The subsequent 30 degrees of the ecliptic is nominally designated the zodiac sign Taurus, and so on through the 12 signs of the zodiac, so that each occupies 1/12th of the zodiac's great circle. Zodiac signs have never been used to determine the boundaries of astronomical constellations that lie in the vicinity of the zodiac, which are, and always have been, irregular in their size and shape. The convention of measuring celestial longitude within individual signs was still being used in the mid-19th century, but modern astronomy now numbers degrees of celestial longitude continuously from 0 degrees to 360 degrees. Rather than 0 degrees to 30 degrees within each sign. This coordinate system is primarily used by astronomers for observations of solar system objects. The use of the zodiac as a means to determine astronomical measurement remained the main method for defining celestial positions by Western astronomers until the Renaissance, at which time preference moved to the equatorial coordinate system, which measures astronomical positions by right ascension and declination rather than the ecliptic-based definitions of celestial longitude and celestial latitude. The orientation of equatorial coordinates are aligned with the Earth's axis of rotation, rather than the plane of the planet's orbit around the Sun. The word zodiac is used in reference to the zodiacal cloud of dust grains that move among the planets, and the zodiacal light that originates from their scattering of sunlight. While its name is derived from the zodiac, the zodiacal light covers the entire night sky, with enhancements in certain directions.